Good morning, Matt.
Welcome back to the DMZ, everyone. I'm here with Bill Scher, who's back at work again this week. Was that you strung 2 weeks together now, Bill?
I don't have an incentive to work because I live in socialist Massachusetts.
That's what it is. I think they may double your paycheck here at the DMZ and get you back in line. So interesting week, of course. I think we moved. Mostly last week we talked about Baltimore, which was dominating the headlines, and it's still out there, of course. But I think politics, both substantive and horse race politics, are back this week. And we had 3 Republicans announced. The Republican presidential field doubled this week. We went from 3 candidates to 6. Interesting diversity. Only 2 sort of standard issue old white men. And that's only if you count Rand Paul as old, because I don't think he really is. So basically, an interesting diverse field. I don't know if it matters. It's probably better than 6 standard issue sort of Republican candidates, but what do you think there, Bill? And where are we at?
It's sort of the question: is this when we have the first debates in August? We are 3 months away from the first debates. Are we going to see? Is the public going to look at those debates and say, "Wow, this is not your grandfather's Republican Party. The face of the Republican Party looks a lot different than it did before, having women on stage, having 2 Latinos on stage, having an African American on stage." Or are we going to replicate the clown car again? I mean, last time we did Michelle Bachmann and Herman Cain last time, so it wasn't just white men, but. And if we're going to have so many candidates, I mean, we're still talking maybe upwards of 19. I don't know how the RNC is going to cull this. I know Reince Priebus has said there's going to be some kind of poll threshold before the debates, but he hasn't spelled out what exactly that is yet. Is he going to get that number down to a manageable level? And also, are you bringing in a whole lot of people that are just so implausible? I mean, Carly Fiorina and Ben Carson and Huckabee are not going to be the nominee, right?
Probably not, but I do think it's an upgrade over last time. Clearly, I mean, I think that clearly Herman Cain, Ben Carson is an upgrade over Herman Cain, just in terms of Carson's background as a neurosurgeon.
His value to society to this point in his life, he has invented people's brains as opposed to fed us crappy pizza.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, pizza's important too. It's not the same as separating.
Like Godfather's pizza. Godfather's pizza is not important.
I'm not a hater. I know it's popular to hate on Godfather's pizza. I'm not a hater. I pretty much like all pizza, and I like there was a Godfather's pizza in Fargo that I used to eat at, so I like Godfather's pizza. But they don't have them. They didn't have them in my part of Maryland, at least. So it's the first time I ever had them was in North Dakota. I think it's a Midwestern thing. But look, I think we could see that separating conjoined twins who were joined at the head slightly more impressive than being a restaurateur. And I think Carly Fiorina is a pretty good upgrade over Michelle Bachmann as well. And then, I mean, more importantly,
that's a low bar, I got to say.
That's a low bar. And then more importantly, the pulchritudinous Michelle Bachmann. And then I think more importantly, Senators Rubio and Cruz are the real deal. And I think either of them could potentially win the nomination. And they're, of course, Hispanic candidates. So I do fear the clown car, Bill, but I also think it's clearly an upgrade, a higher quality bench this time around.
I mean, you've written very negatively about Ben Carson joining the race, correct?
I've written very negatively about everybody. That's what I do for a living.
You are a hater.
I write bad things about people. That's pretty much what I do. And I'm guessing they all think that I'm out to get them, which is wrong. It's nothing.
Equal opportunity hater.
Yeah, I mean, I spread it around, at least. I would say that. I mean, it's not necessarily equal opportunity. There are people that I, tend to agree with and like more than others. But, I write. I like Ben Carson, but I'm writing a piece about him now for the week that he probably wouldn't like. About his whole obsession with being politically incorrect. And as much as I hate the sort of political correctness run amok, the whole trigger warning, the sort of BS. I do think that, just sort of announcing or declaring that you're politically incorrect is a license to act like a jerk and to say crazy things. Because some of what we call political correctness is really just politeness and protocol. So anyway, that's what my latest piece is about on Ben Carson. So
do you mention that? I mean, I thought it was very weird in his announcement. I mean, the first thing he does, he's up there with his wife. He talks about how they shoot pool together, but that he usually beats her. And then he does as a joke. Now the media is going to say Ben Carson beats his wife. Yuck, yuck, yuck. I mean, that's just sort of deliberate political incorrectness. But it's also kind of like you're joking about people beating their wives. That's just not what presidents normally do, because it's kind of unseemly and uncomfortable.
I mean, I think he's a weird cat. There's no doubt about that. And I'm not even trying to rhyme and be a hip cat, man. No, he's not your average person, and maybe that's because he's got a big brain, the kind of brain that can do neurosurgery and separate conjoined twins. Maybe it's because his mom essentially walled him off from the community and made him read books. Maybe it's got something to do with Seventh-day Adventist background. I don't know what it is, but there's something not normal about him. And again, maybe that's what it takes to be a brilliant neurosurgeon, but I don't know that it works in politics, Bill.
So of the three announcements this week, Fiorina, Carson, and Huckabee, we talked about before that Ruby had a very good announcement, though I saw a poll analysis, I think it was Huffington Post, Mark Blumenthal, tracking the poll bumps that everyone had gotten so far after they announced, and suggested that Ruby got a poll bump, but it wasn't dramatically different than Ted Cruz's poll bump, which seems to dissipate as you get farther away from the announcement. So we don't seem to have an announcement that has been a true game changer in the race as of yet. Maybe you still disagree. Do you think that Huckabee or Fiorina or Carson's announcements are potential game changers, or is it just becoming a lot of noise because they're all stepping on each other's announcements and none of them have been particular standouts?
I mean, I think the Rubio announcement's the one that's mattered the most, as I've talked about ad nauseum. I don't think these three announcements matter that much. It was interesting. Huckabee did his in Hope, Arkansas, and that sort of harkens back to Bill Clinton's "I Still Believe in a Place Called Hope." I know that journalists went to Doe's, which is, I guess, the famous place that Carville and Stephanopoulos went to.
I've been to that Doe's. That is the real deal.
Well, tell us about it. Let's not move on.
Even bigger real deal, by the way, is the original Doe's in Greenville, Mississippi, which the Doe's in Arkansas is in downtown Little Rock. The one in Greenville, Mississippi is like in a shack with a flapping screen door in the middle of nowhere. And when you walk in the front door, you walk through the kitchen before you get to your basement table. That's where the real steak is. But I digress, sir.
Have you been to? You've been to both those?
I've been to both places. Yes, I have. That is my
why
favorite
in the
steak
hell?
Nation.
What on earth would bring Bill Scher to the Doe's of Hope, Arkansas, and Mississippi?
No, I was the Doe's in Little Rock. I don't. Is there one in Hope now too? I've been to the one in Little Rock.
No, it was probably Little Rock. They were probably in Little Rock and Hope. I mean, the announcement was in Hope, but the reporters probably went in Little Rock.
Well, I actually had my bachelor party weekend in Little Rock, so I could go to Doe's and go to the Clinton
That's where everyone
Museum.
does it.
Exactly. And before then, my wife and I road tripped from California to New York. We went in the winter, so we went the southern route. And I I convinced her to do a detour between San Antonio and Louisiana by going up into Mississippi so we can go to that doze and then come back down.
All right, I want to throw out a quick plug here. Not a plug, but I had to. Have you ever heard? There's an underrated country song, Bill, from I want to say the late '80s, probably. It's called Little Rock, but it's I Think I'm on a Roll Here in Little Rock. Do you know this one? You know this song?
I don't.
Check it out. Look it up. It's. I mean, there's like a female Little Rock song that's not about Little Rock, Arkansas, but this is actually. It's about a recovering. It's like a ballad sort. It's about a recovering alcoholic. He gets a job at working at a Walmart in Arkansas. Anyway, check that out, folks. I think I'm on a roll here in Little Rock. You can Google that. I know, Bill, you're a country music aficionado. And who among us doesn't hold our bachelor parties in Little Rock, Arkansas? I think.
My friends are very annoyed with me that I dragged him down there, but I regret nothing.
Okay, so why were you at the Doze in Mississippi?
Well, because I'd read great things about that Doze.
But I mean, were you on the same trip? On the same trip you went to two different Doze?
No. That was with a road trip with my wife from California to New York before we were married. When we were relocating from California to New York, and we drove cross country to do it. And we did a circuitous route so we could get to that Doze.
I think Carly Fiorina's announcement was probably the smartest. She basically, I don't even think she gave a big speech. She went on Good Morning America and had a video and did a conference call. So
and the video has her watching the Hillary announcement and then turning it off, and because her whole shtick has been, "I am the best foil the Republicans could have to Hillary. You need a woman like me who's accomplished things in business to contrast her lack of accomplishments as a senator and as Secretary of State. And I'm going to be the biggest attack dog on the scene." I take that all as, make me your VP so I will be the attack dog for Hillary Clinton. But perhaps you think she still has an actual shot being the nominee.
No, I don't even think she has a shot at being the VP, but I think she could end up in the cabinet. And I think she'll be a welcome addition to the field. I mean, I have a piece up at the Daily Beast today about how it's insane to run for president. There's this conventional wisdom that has set in recent years that running for president is essentially always a smart move. It raises your profile, elevates you. Mostly it turns out really bad. And if you look at the 2012 field and the people who ran, most of them are probably worse off today than they were 4 years ago. And I think Carly Fiorina is one of those people that actually will benefit from running. I think that she's going to make the field stronger. I think she's going to be able to attack Hillary in a way that, sort of the male candidates can't. And I think she's, smart. She essentially is ready for prime time. So I think that she'll benefit from running, even though I don't think she can win or will win the nomination.
So the other developments in the Republican race this week, one was the Bridgegate indictments that came out at the end of last week. Christie not indicted himself, but people pretty close to him being indicted, and some indications from those indicted that they have more to say about what the governor's office, if not the governor himself, knew about the bridge closings. And we haven't heard all that much from Christie since then, beyond his statement that this proves that I didn't know anything about it. So there's that. There's also some of the polling that's come out that, on one hand, I saw a national poll, I think it was NBC, Wall Street Journal, that had Jeb Bush clearing 20% again and leading the pack, but an Iowa poll had him 7th in single digits. So do you have a sense whether one is Christie done for now? Is there just no hope for a Christie comeback at this point? And is Jeb consolidating his position or weakening it, depending on which poll you think is more important?
Well, there's no doubt that, it's funny, Bill. Chris Christie, if you go back a couple years ago, you don't even have to go back 2 years. If you go back, a year and a half ago, probably. There was a point where Chris Christie was really kicking butt, and when he was reelected, I mean, it was like, why? This guy is super popular. He's going to win a landslide in his home state, which is a blue state. Why can't the other Republicans be like him? And here we are today. I think that I think Christie is in huge trouble electorally, but I still think he might run. And all I know is what I'm reading and hearing, what everyone else is reading and hearing. I don't have any inside information on this, of course, but not of course, because sometimes I do, but I don't have any inside information. But they're sending signals that he may be running, and I just have to think the psychology of people who are successful at politics is that they can always come back, that they can always overcome. You know, I mean, Ben Carson was a poor kid in a single-family home in Detroit and went on to become a neurosurgeon. So, of course, he thinks he can, if he can do brain surgery, he can figure out how to become president. You know, Ted Cruz was never elected, and he beat the sitting lieutenant governor of Texas, who had more money than God, and became the senator. So, of course, he can become a president. You know, Marco Rubio ran against Charlie Crist, who was incredibly popular, sitting governor of Florida, who had the tacit, if not official, support of the NRSC, and Marco Rubio won. So, of course, he thinks he can figure out how to be the president. I mean, all of these guys have had nothing over their lives but, well, I take that back. I mean, some of them have had disappointments, and that brings wisdom, but by and large, these guys have had wild success and have done things that everyone told them they couldn't do, which only reinforces the notion that they can turn things around. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Christie run and try to redeem himself on the trail.
But it's insane, right? I mean, he might do that because he's insane, but it's an insane thing to do.
Here's the thing, though. I would have said it's insane for Marco Rubio. Like I remember thinking, I really hope, I like this guy Marco Rubio, and I don't like Charlie Crist, but he's going to destroy his career. He should just run for attorney general like everybody wants him to do. I mean, that was my sort of moderate temperament told me. And if I was Marco Rubio, I wouldn't be in the Senate today, because I would have done what seemed to be the smart move that wasn't crazy. So yes, it seems crazy for Chris Christie to think he can do this, rehabilitate his image. But it was also crazy for Ted Cruz to think he could beat David Dewhurst, you know?
I suppose if you throw 10 crazy politicians up at a wall, a few of them are gonna stick at you sometimes. I still think
there's also the thing of like
Chris Christie to do it.
And Christie may also think, even if I don't win, I can change the subject. People are going to like me. I can attack Obama. Once I get into debates, it'll all change. I mean, there's a rationalization, maybe a suspension of disbelief. I don't know, but I think there's an argument that a guy like Christie would make to himself that you should run.
And so, what do you think about Jeb at this point? I mean, Jeb has not been all that publicly active in the past few days, although there's signals that he's going to raise, a ton of money, perhaps considerably more than everybody else in the race.
I guess it was a sign when he told people to quit sending him too much money, more than like $1 million or whatever. To quit sending his super PAC so much money, that was a sign he was going to be doing okay.
Right. Anyway, here's I think one of the interesting things about the race. All these folks are jumping in, and not doing that intermediary step of an exploratory committee. Just sort of showing that I'm going to show my cards. I'm not going to be coy. I'm just going to jump in. Well, Jeb's not doing that because as long as he is not a candidate, he can raise a ton of money for his super PAC and not violate campaign finance laws and have a much fatter war chest. And you basically set up the super PAC to do everything that he wants it to do. So when he becomes a candidate, he can then back away and not technically coordinate with it, but he's got all his people in there, and he's personally raised a ton of money for it, and then they're just good to go once he jumps in months down the line.
Not only that, that's all true, but not only that, he also can keep coordinating because he's not an official candidate, and he also can pay all of his expenses. So as he travels around the country giving speeches now, he can pay for that travel from these unlimited donations made to his super PAC. If he declared for presidency, his personal travel would have to be paid for out of the campaign, which would deplete his campaign's resources, which are coming from limited donations. So it's a really interesting strategy. You know, I think Cruz was very smart to jump in the way he did, because by being first, he got an advantage and got a bump and some press. But, you know, Jeb, you know, why not? I mean, at some point you have to declare, because I guess you probably have to declare to get in the debates. But why not hold it off for as long as you can? It's, you know.
I mean, it just seems to me that, you know, so long as Jeb doesn't collapse and it's just complete political poison amongst Republican primary voters, and I think that national polling suggests he's holding his own. He's institutionally very difficult to surmount. I mean, he's going to have so much more money, so much more A-list support that you really gotta. I mean, you gotta take him out in some way if you're going to get past. I mean, a Ted Cruz, it's like a Newt Gingrich or Rick Santorum before. If you don't have the money, you got to live off the land of media attention, perhaps propped up by a single sugar daddy, and that tends to only last for so long. You can only throw so many bombshells to get media hits over the course of a year-long campaign before you look like a one-trick pony. And I just think Jeb is got such a fortress being built that I find it very hard to see how that gets punctured.
Well, the other thing too is, I mean, with Chris Christie on the ropes, and you know, I think Kasich's going to get in, but he's not in yet. Pence on the ropes. I don't think he gets in. Certainly not after RFRA. So in other words, Jeb has a much clearer shot at his establishment lane. Seems like Rubio is going to, you know, try to be, I mean, he'll get some establishment support, but he's also going to go for the conservative lane, the Tea Party lane. So it seems like Jeb has a clearer shot at the establishment lane, whereas it's getting more crowded on the right. So you could certainly see a scenario where Ben Carson and Ted Cruz and Mike Huckabee and Rand Paul, you know, all divide up, and Rubio sort of divide up the conservative side, and Jeb kind of just, you know, wins Iowa with 25% of the vote or something like that.
Now, the other element of the Republican race going on is happening on the floor of the Senate, where they just passed the budget. The Senate passed the budget, but Ted Cruz and Rand Paul were the two who voted against the Republican budget, the only two, whereas Senator Rubio and Senator Lindsey Graham, who was also running, they voted for it. Cruz and Paul arguing that it didn't cut enough, even though it bounces the budget in 9 years. Some of that's insufficient cutting. And you have this Iran bill, which I think probably is a more interesting situation. This is the Corker bill that tries to put some congressional role in the Iran nuclear deal process. It delays Obama's ability to waive sanctions on Iran. I think it's for 60 days. So Congress can review it, but once that 60 days expires, Obama can still waive the sanctions. So on one hand, you know, Lindsey Graham, who's pretty hawkish, pretty much hates Iran, doesn't trust the deal. He's saying we need this bill because having this congressional review period is going to give us some time to poke holes in it. It's going to keep Iran on their toes. It's going to strengthen Obama's hand in the final negotiations. Whereas Rubio, who voted for it in committee, is also saying we need to have additional amendments to this bill to toughen it up, particularly saying we can't have any deal unless Iran recognizes the right of Israel to exist.
Right. So these are poison pill amendments.
Right. So and Tom Kahn, who's with Rubio, said these aren't poison pills; these are vitamin pills that make the bill stronger.
That's a good line. I like that.
Bill Kristol's out there saying that the Corker bill is toothless as it stands and it isn't worth anything unless it has these amendments. So you had Democrats working with McConnell to agree on a series of amendments that Democrats would find acceptable, but those did not include the Rubio amendment and also some other and the Cotton amendments. And then Cotton tried to do a parliamentary move to force consideration of their amendments first, which upset the Democrats and apparently has prodded McConnell to say, I'm going to shut this down. I promised a freewheeling open Senate floor before. Forget it. I'm not going to let Rubio and Cotton sabotage the bill. I'm going to jam this through with no amendments. So what does Rubio do at this point? I wrote about this for Real Clear Politics on Monday. I'm speculating that Rubio has an opportunity. The guy's got to distinguish himself. He's got to break up from the pack. Here's his moment to say, the establishment is trying to shut us out. So we need to fight for these amendments on the floor of the House. And maybe he goes as far as say, if they can't get him there, then we should vote no on the bill. So that might be a good play for Rubio to show some leadership that would stoke the embers of the conservative base. What I do think that the right is missing on this is whether the Corker bill passes or the Corker bill doesn't pass, either way, Obama maintains his waiver authority because he has waiver authority based on other laws that Congress previously passed, including Republicans in Congress right now. They gave him that authority in the other Iran sanctions bills. And they can only revoke it if they have a 2/3 vote because they have to override Obama's veto. So they put themselves in this awful position where no matter what they do in the Corker bill, it doesn't matter. So I think substantively it doesn't change the trajectory of Obama's negotiation with Iran, but it may be an opportunity for Rubio to get some brownie points with the right.
Yeah, I think you're right. Rubio is sort of conflicted here, right? On one hand, he's an institutionalist. He doesn't want to burn the house down. I don't think McConnell hates him or anything like that, the way that they hate Cruz. On the other hand, Rubio is very hawkish and authentically very concerned about this Iran deal. And it's also smart politics to play this up. So I think he's torn, and I think it'll be interesting to see how he plays this going forward. The smart move electorally is to do what you suggest, to sort of, be outraged by this and go against McConnell. That potentially could hurt his ability to legislate and operate within the Senate going forward, which seems to be something.
Where's that risk there? I mean, why would if Corker actually if Rubio doesn't actually thwart the bill, he just grandstands. I mean, would McConnell be very understanding of that? Would he say let Rubio have his fun, but I'm still going to get the bill through, and he gets to score some points with the right? Everybody wins.
Possibly. I mean, it depends how it's done. Maybe there's a way to thread that needle. But yeah, it's funny though, Bill. When it comes to sort of pointless fights like the defund Obamacare fight, which I thought was pointless because you couldn't defund Obamacare. And so you're sort of taking this stand, but the stand will do nothing but hurt the Republican Party and accomplish nothing. I was against that. In this case, I'm sort of with the people who the Republicans who want to stand up against the Corker bill on this one. Number one, the stakes are so high. Iran going nuclear is different than Obamacare becoming the law of the land. And the question is, do Republicans want to be complicit in it, or do they want to do everything they can to fight it? I think, I also think there's no political downside to this, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't think that, like, this isn't shutting down the government. I don't think that there's a big political potential downside for Republicans to try to fight this tooth and nail, even if they lose. So that's kind of where I am. And I mean, fundamentally, I think this thing, nobody really knows what's in this framework exactly. But it really comes down to, like, do you trust Iran? No. Do you trust Obama to negotiate a tough deal? No. And so, because of both those things, it just seems like the obvious thing to do is to oppose this deal. And the Corker, what Corker's attempting to do, although probably well-intentioned, will make it more likely that this happens.
And so what about the budget? So here you got the first budget to pass Congress in years. House and Senate Republicans get on board. It's a I would argue a radical budget. It's a very rapid timetable to balance the budget, and it's all done with spending cuts and no tax increases. So that would mean very, very steep cuts in social spending. May put some senators in tough spots come re-election time if they're running in bluer states. Yet Cruz and Paul make their stand, say this is not good enough. I mean, to what extent do you get so far on the right that Republican voters say, "Come on, you're showing yourself to be ridiculous. This is as good a budget as we could ever possibly want, and it's still not good enough for you." That just is a signal to me that you're not a serious candidate.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much. I mean, I think maybe it is a sign that they're not serious, but I don't know how much the public picks up on that or draws that conclusion, or how much attention this will get. So I doubt if it really impacts what you think about, what the average voter sort of thinks about Cruz or Paul. Maybe at some point there's some mounting evidence that they're playing games and that they're sort of just against everything. I think this is the first time Congress has passed a budget in how many years? 14 years or something ridiculous. It's unbelievable.
Certainly since, I don't recall. I don't think Democrats passed their own budget in the first 2 years when Obama was in charge and they were still in the Congress. I think they might have passed on that. They certainly didn't do it when Republicans took the House. They just gridlocked at that point. But I don't think they passed one before. And people the Republicans always made a big deal about that. It sort of makes you seem like you're incompetent. But the budget resolutions themselves are non-binding documents. They're supposed to guide the work of the appropriations committees. You're still able to fund the government without it, which they always did. Yeah. Now I think the tougher question.
But I do think this is. I mean, look, I agree with you. It's not the end all and be all, but I do think this is a positive sign. I mean, Mitch McConnell basically ran promising. And by the way, he promised to allow amendments too. So that goes to our previous discussion, but promising to return to regular order and to do just the simple, competent blocking and tackling things that you expect them to do, which includes passing a budget. So I'm not claiming that this is going to change the world, but it does seem to be like a very small but obvious sign that something good. It gives me hope for the future that the Congress can at least pass a budget.
Now, isn't your hope going to be completely destroyed in a matter of months when the appropriations committees have to take this budget and translate it into actual spending bills that Obama does have to sign for the government to stay open? He doesn't sign the budget resolution. That's non-binding. We're now going to have a series of votes. There's 12 different appropriations bills. It's going to put Rubio and Graham and Cruz and Paul on the spot again. Do you vote for an appropriations bill that is the purest conservative vision for the government, forcing the veto and risking the shutdown again? Or, if not initially, at some point, do you say, look, we got to keep the government open. We can't have a shutdown again. We can't cut as deeply as we would like if we want Obama to sign this and keep the government open. Isn't that going to create another point of division within the Republican Party, not too far from now, right when the Republican presidential debates are about to start?
Well, look, I mean, I think the goal, hopefully, is to return to regular order, to get rid of these, continuing resolutions and omnibus bills, and this is a step in the right direction. Can they keep it up? Stay tuned for next week. But for today, they did something that the Democrats were unable to do for multiple years, which is simply to pass a budget. So today I will commend them, and we will see how it goes from there.
Well, in the alternate parallel universe of Great Britain, they have their national elections tomorrow. We're taping on Wednesday. This is going to happen Thursday, May 7th.
But technically, they're 5 hours or something ahead of us, so they may know. By the time this airs, they may know.
Well, they actually won't know who actually runs Great Britain when the election is over because no party is expected to get a clear majority. I'll get to that. I'll try to explain this as succinctly as I can for folks who haven't been following. But I think it's relevant to the American Republican budget discussion because the ruling conservatives got in 5 years ago on the heels of the market crash, which, unlike in the U.S., the Labor Party was blamed for because they were the ones in charge at the time, and so the economy tanked and deficits skyrocketed as a result. So conservatives get in. They don't get a clear majority in 2010. They have to partner with the more liberal Democrats, at the time seen as more to the left than Labor. But the Lib Dems wanted to put a shiv into Labor, and so they join with the conservatives. And the conservatives embark on a very stiff austerity plan, which not only cuts Social Security benefits, cuts other social spending, but also raises taxes on the middle class. It's sort of different than the Bush era Republicans in the U.S. They raised the VAT, their sales tax. They raised tuition. They tripled tuition fees, and they even had a welfare reform where you get penalized if you live in an apartment that has unoccupied beds, which Labor called a bedroom tax. Even though it's not technically a tax, it's a cutting of your welfare benefits. And at the same time, they cut the top tax rate for the wealthy. So it was a very audacious program, which put the liberal Democrats in a very awkward position because their voters are now livid that they were the handmaiden to all this. And the economy, at least initially, wasn't doing very well. Now, economy's done better in the past 2 years, but as Paul Krugman has argued, that's because they eased up on the austerity. They didn't continue with the program. They kind of took a pause. And even in the last quarter, the economy's been pretty weak. So you now have the Conservative Party arguing, we're on a good path. This is working. We got to stay on the path. If they literally say it's working in their final ad, pointing to the more recent economic numbers, but they're proposing another round of cuts if they do win that are very, very steep. So they're trying to sell that the cuts were the stiff, tough, courageous medicine that Britain needed. The Liberal Democrats are running away from those cuts. They're trying to argue that they softened the cuts, and that's why the economy is better. And they're still open to being in another coalition with the conservatives, which is angering their voters. The Liberal Democrats' vote total is way down. They're going to almost really lose half their seats on Thursday, which cramps the conservatives' ability to remain in power because their vote share is probably going to decline too. You have a Labor Party that's picking up those Lib Dem votes and arguing they're going to turn things around, but they're seen as not liberal enough by some, particularly by the Scots. The Scottish National Party is set to possibly sweep Scotland. They now have 6 seats. They might get over 50 after tomorrow, which wipes out Labour in Scotland, but also eats into the Liberal Democrats, which is bad for the Conservatives because they need the Liberal Democrats to have a coalition. And on top of all of that, you have the UK Independence Party, which is to the right of the Conservatives, and they're anti-immigrant, they're anti-European Union, and they're not expected to win many seats, if any at all, but they're holding down the Conservative vote, which is making it easier for Labour to pick up seats, possibly as many as 3 dozen, from more conservative territory in England and Wales. So it's a very convoluted situation. And I think it raises questions for American conservatives to look at, is deep cuts in practice actually politically sellable? And there's the immigration question. Should Cameron have done a better job in immigration to stave off the UKIP folks? Or was Cameron's fault that he had pledged 5 years ago to cut immigration dramatically? He gave a numeric pledge of the tens of thousands, and instead immigration shot up to 300,000 net migration. And so he's being hammered on that by UKIP as well as Labor. So there's those questions that arise, and then there's the question for the Labor Party that American liberals should look at. To what extent can you run as an anti-austerity party? On one hand, there's enough of a resurgence on the left that the Scots are dominant, and Miliband, the Labor leader, is in decent shape. But Miliband has been forced to say, we're going to cut the deficit every year, not as severely as the Conservatives will, or they pledge to do. But he can't just be super Keynesian because he's being hammered in town halls and by the press for the high deficits on their watch when they were last in charge. And so he has to still pledge he's going to be a good fiscal steward, even though he wants to say he's going to invest in health and invest in education and not be as tough as the Conservatives. So there's a lot of complicated factors going on. No one's expected to get a majority. There'll be some kind of coalition at the end of the day, but how that coalition comes together is very much unknown.
Let me just say, I write for a London paper, and I have no idea what you just said. But
did that make sense? I at least explain it remotely well. I have a longer explanation, by the way, at ourfuture.org that's like 3,000 words long. But I did my best to pull it down as best I could.
Give the URL again, Bill.
At ourfuture.org, the Campaign for America's Future site. I have a long UK explainer there. But did my short explainer make any sense to you?
Perfectly. And I look forward to this. What is it, a 4,000 word piece?
3,000 words, something like that. I was up very late last night, so I forget where I landed. But
never let it be said that we're not cosmopolitan and international here.
What it looks like is going to happen is it seems almost impossible for the Conservatives to get a majority. The Lib Dem vote is going to be so cut, and it's not being picked up by any UKIP votes or by Conservative votes. So it seems implausible that they could piece together a majority, even if the Conservatives had the plurality. They might get the most votes overall, but not a majority vote share. And it's sort of traditional in British politics that first past the post gets to be the leaders. So in the Lib Dems are trying to say, well, we really can't have the second biggest vote getter being leader of the country. That would be illegitimate. But the Scots have said we won't partner with the Conservatives, and Labour, of course. The other issue here is that the Scots National Party, are pro-independence. And numerically, it seems the only way the Labour could get in would be with the SNP. And so the Conservatives are saying, you can't vote Labour because they're going to have to be in league with the SNP, and they want to break up the country. So that's not tenable. And so that forces Labour to say, well, there's no way we'll be in coalition with the SNP. We would never do that. So they can't do a formal alliance, but they might do something that's called vote by vote, where there's no SNP cabinet ministers, but they still basically let Miliband be the leader because they don't want to do what the Lib Dems did and be blamed for whatever David Cameron and the Conservatives do. The other thing that could happen is if Miliband thinks that relationship is untenable, that they can't survive on a vote-by-vote basis, that the SNP would be extracting too many demands out of them because they're more to the left for on things like spending and taxes. That the Labour could try to pull off a unity government. They get all the parties to be in, including the Conservatives, and then move towards a constitutional convention, rewrite the entire Constitution, have massive electoral reform, and move to a new election in 2 years. That's also very possible if Labour and SNP can't find a way to get along.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen.
Did I blow your mind there, Matt?
I'm lucky I can follow American politics to the degree that I can. With my Shepherd College education, I'm just a country blogger, Bill. And you've done upended my entire...
This is a fantastic argument against multi-party systems. Because you end up with results that the voters don't really expect or want. I mean, last time the Liberal Dems got totally hosed by their leader, and they end up with a government...
You know who else... You know who else benefited from a multi-party system, Bill? Hitler. That's right. That's right.
You had to go there.
Never.
It's always been Hitler with you. People.
Yeah. Well, look, I think we've been well served by our current two-party system. Let's keep it going. Keep it simple, folks. Keep it simple. It's the economy.
In a two-party system, you have factions, and those factions have to compromise with each other for the party to stay in power. So there are folks who say, well, I really want to be able to vote my purist ideology. I don't want to have to compromise in my vote. Well, the compromises happen anyway, because the parties have to then compromise after the election. And they may go in a direction that you really didn't want them to go towards. So why not have the parties do that compromising ahead of time, and you can vote on how well they work out their differences?
Yeah, but I think our system, the downside of it is it sort of bastardizes everything and makes everybody kind of, play to the masses. But the upside is you don't get our system necessarily co-opts the good ideas from upstarts and weeds out fringe movements, right? So right. I think it's pretty good. And by the way, it was not preordained. I mean, most of what I like about America, you could say the founding fathers envisioned it this way. But the two-party system, Washington didn't even want any political parties, right? So right. What we have, I guess, more or less developed organically, and then they've set up a system that will keep out third parties. I mean, I have no doubt about that. But, I think it's worked out quite well for a couple hundred years. So I'm happy with it.
Well, on that note, sir, we will check back after the Brits vote next week. We'll see if they even have a government by the next time we talk again. And who knows how many more Republicans will jump in the presidential race by our next show. So I'm on the edge of my seat. What awaits us next week?
I'm biting the fingernails. Clutching the pearls. Another good show, Bill, as always. People, check out the Matt Lewis and the News podcast on iTunes. You can listen to this. And by the way, if you are watching us, why would you be doing that? Because there's not a lot to see here. You could just listen to this. Well, you could watch too, but you can also listen if you're on the metro, you're at the treadmill, you're out for a jog. This is on iTunes. You can find this podcast, listen to the audio. You could keep up to date with us on Twitter, at DMZ Show. Tweet us ideas. What should we be talking about? What don't you like about the show? And you can find us on Facebook /DMZ Show as well. So lots of ways to keep in touch, lots of ways to consume this media. And check out my piece at the Daily Beast about why you have to be stupid to run for president. And Bill, ourfuture.org, is that it?
That's correct.
That's where your 4,000-word epic piece explaining what is happening in the UK can be found. So, anything else, Bill?
I think that'll do it. We'll see you next week.
All right. See you in the DMZ. Stay classy.